Thank you so much for coming today and joining us. We're really glad that you're here.
I'm so happy to be here.
Congrats.
Thank you.
So in my preparation for today, I was like, you do a lot of stuff, like a lot. Yes. So for those that aren't aware of everything, that all the different hats that you wear, do you mind sharing a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I am a poet, obviously. I've been writing poetry, I would say, like more consistently or kind of on purpose since like 2013.
I love the transition to on purpose.
Yeah, because I didn't honestly know, like I didn't study poetry undergrad. I didn't know that like people were poets for real. Like I just thought like Maya Angelou, you know?
Right.
I'm from a small city, so there wasn't many opportunities. So I've been doing that for, I guess, almost like 11 years.
Wow.
I also work in social media professionally. Don't know if I love it. And
I hear that.
I'm currently studying up to do graphic design and visual art. So really trying to transition kind of more into the visual art, graphic design lane and kind of infuse that with my love of poetry by doing like creative direction, art direction for book design and things of that nature.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's so cool. It seems like you kind of want to do it all.
Yeah, it seems that way, but honestly, I don't. Okay. Like, I want like a lot more ease in my life.
That's so real. That line is so thin.
Yeah.
Where you're like, this sounds really interesting. I'm really interested in it, but like I'm tired also.
Yeah. I think I'm trying to move closer to what I feel like would be ease, which is like working more into graphic design. Just because I'm writing at work and then you want to go home and write, it's kind of like some of that creativity gets sucked out of me.
For sure.
So I'm trying to make things a little bit easier for myself, make it easier for me to freelance, things of that nature.
Yeah. You use the word ease a lot, and I think that that's a word that a lot of us are kind of gravitating towards now just because life is not easeful for many, many, many reasons. Do you feel like you're working towards that ease now that, you know, your collection is out?
I think yes, because the collection is out, but also just in terms of like being a Black woman who was queer, there's not a lot of ease that is kind of built within it. And so when I say that I'm moving towards ease, I don't want it to get kind of misinterpreted of like me closing out the world or being like, oh, well, I don't care about the things that are happening. But I mean like a self-ease. I'm very like uptight or hard on myself. So I'm looking for like an ease that that I can just like kind of sustain.
Yeah.
So I would say that's what I'm trying to do now.
Yeah. I think what you said is so true in the sense of like when we try to embrace ease or try to just embrace a slower living or try and take care of ourselves a little bit more intentionally, people kind of conflate it with a lack of care for the issues and the things that are going on in the world and things that we should care about, when it's like we need to be able to do both, to do them both well, if that makes sense.
100%. I definitely agree there. And I think once you kind of achieve a personal ease, it's easier for you to show up for your community. If you are like, you know, down and out, or you can't even like sustain your own like level of peace, then it's really hard for you to kind of go into those other arenas where people are fighting for them for their lives or fighting for their loved ones and like be productive or like actually contribute something to those spaces. So I think it's really important.
For sure. Do you feel like that's a part of something that you've learned now that your book is out, just kind of like what that balance looks like for you and what the future looks like as well too? Because I can imagine there was probably a lot of stress and maybe some worry or some feelings of anxiety leading up until this moment.
For sure. The publishing process is definitely one that can be difficult. I definitely felt like I had to like kind of stay on top of things. And that's really hard for me because I have a very nonchalant like attitude. And so it was me having to really be assertive. I mean, I am an
Like, be a
Aries.
little bit more
Yeah. But it was just like, okay, like, can we actually have a meeting? Can we actually get on the phone? Can we actually like talk about this? And that I had to just kind of be like forceful. I don't want to say forceful, but like be like just more intentional and like
Yeah.
assertive about it to get like the process going and to like actually get a release date and, you know, get to where I am. So that brought me out of my ease a little bit, but I'm just really happy that it's out in the world now and people get to enjoy it.
Yeah. You talked about the publishing process being difficult, which we talk about here often, right? And I hate that it is such a common thread, and that people do have to experience so much just to put out their work, right? How did you take care of yourself mentally throughout that process? Was there anything that you had to maybe learn and unlearn about yourself and about the ways that you do things throughout that time?
Yeah, it was definitely just like how nonchalant I am. I had to kind of like reel that in and be like, okay, well, what's actually happening? Like, can I get some answers on this? Like I said, like getting on the phone with people, getting on Zoom and like actually being like, okay, so what is the timeline? Like, can we get a timeline? Can you let me know what's happening? Also, you know, going to therapy.
Shout out to therapy.
Yeah, like talking to my therapist about my stress. I have a lot of stress that I'm working through as far as like working in corporate and then like how that translates to having a book out, wanting to promote it. Like, I mean, right now I'm in Houston, I live in Charlotte. So traveling, that things of that nature. So really trying to find the balance within it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, how do you find the balance working corporate, but also being an artist, a creative, a writer? You also run a collective that I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more too, but like, how do you do it all?
I watch a lot of Criminal Minds. Maybe that's not the most productive thing to do, but
It is. It is. I'm a strong advocate for watching comfort shows when you just need to quiet your mind.
Yeah.
There's a lot of science behind it, but it's comforting to know what's going to happen in a show and you don't have to put too much pressure on it, but you already like, there's a sense of like memories that are attached to the shows that we watch too that sometimes are positive. So
yeah, for sure. So I do a lot of TV. Also, right now, I would say that I'm really not writing that much poetry, which is fine. I'm doing a lot more reading. So I've been trying to coax myself into, I'm like, okay, girl, you cannot watch TikTok all night. Put that phone down, get a book. So just like telling myself to read before bed, to go to bed a little bit more easefully. Have a story on your mind that's not the drama on TikTok.
yes.
So
I was like, you're talking for me too at this point. I'll be like, girl, put it down.
Put it
Pick up a
down.
book.
It's gonna be here tomorrow.
It is.
So doing that, and then I like to say that I have these rot days on the weekend. So I like usually pick a day. It's usually Saturday where I'm like, there's no alarm. We're waking up. We're probably getting on the couch and we're watching Criminal Minds
with a nice
or whatever
blanket.
show. Yeah. Make your food and you're good. So I definitely do those to just kind of get my mind out of the week.
Yeah. Rot days are so important. I try to tell people that all the time. Like, we live in a world where you're always needed, right? Whether you're needed by your friends or your family or work, or your social media needs you too, because there's, like you said, some drama that's going on and you want to get all parts of the story, or you yourself are posting. So I think that to have those days where you're like, I have no responsibility to anyone today, including myself. I'm just going to roll around.
Yep.
It's very important as a reset.
For sure.
How does your work with social media impact the ways that you've kind of been promoting the book as well too? Has that been an interesting process for you? Has it been easy?
I think that's the other thing. It's like, I think there's sometimes this misconception that if you work in social media, then you also have a very popping social media. And sometimes that is the case. Like, some people can do both. I am not one of those people. I don't want to make a social media like strategy for myself.
Oh my gosh,
I'm terrible. I'm not super interested. I did do some promo at the beginning. I like filmed like an unboxing of the books. That did really well. on social, and then I did like this little mini countdown because April is also National Poetry Month.
Right.
So I did like, I read a poem for like 6 days until the book came out on TikTok, and I did pretty well, and I'll just continue to do that. I get to like do flyers for like some of the shows that I'm doing, so that's been really fun. And yeah, that's how I've been promoting it.
Yeah. Would you say that people have been more receptive to kind of getting the book, just kind of hearing more from you? And I'm sure that through this strategy, you're also telling little bits of your story in the writing process as well, too. Have you learned anything about the ways that people have received it?
Yeah, I think one of the things I was like worried about going into it is when I submitted this, I had like a larger collection. So I probably had like 50 poems.
Oh, wow.
Which could be like, I could have submitted to like contests for like full length, but I just knew in my heart that it wasn't ready. It like needed more time. I needed more time. So I did the smaller collection of poems, which is my chapbook. And so through that process, I kind of took a lot of my poems that were considered more heavier topics, a lot of like about like police brutality. I have a poem that's about the year of 1968, which is the year Martin Luther King was killed, and it's also the year that my mom was born. So just making these correlations between like my blackness and what's going on in the world. I didn't put a lot of those poems into the chapbook. I kind of themed my chapbook out to be really like a queer coming of age. I really want to focus on that. And sometimes I was like, oh my gosh, like, are people gonna be like, these are not Black poems? And one of my friends was like, girl, you're a Black poet.
Yeah.
There are always gonna be Black poems.
Right.
Even if you're not talking completely about social justice, or you took some of those poems out, like, people know where you stand.
Yeah.
And so, even just getting the last poem that I got published, which was about, like, I called out, like, Palestine and Congo and Sudan and all these places. That's not in the book. I mean, I just wrote it. And so even just getting that published was really important to me. And I got it published by Torch Literary.
I read
which
it.
is like
Trust
another.
and Believe.
Yeah,
I did read it.
and I was like, it has to go here, or it has to go to like a place that I feel like will respect this poem and make sure that it comes out the right way.
Right. I think it's so many things that you said stand out to me. The one that keeps coming back is the fact that you felt like your poems weren't Black poems. And I think we really live in a world that tries to limit our experience as Black people. And it's like we're only allowed to be experts in certain conversations and certain topics. And it's so unfair that you even have to think that as a Black person, that your work wouldn't be considered Black because you're not talking about the things that are expected of us.
Yeah. And I think like some of that was like my own insecurities of removing some of those poems. But I really value, if I'm going to be giving my work to someone, I want to make sure that the people that it's in the hands of really respect it, really like appreciate it, and really value it. And I'm not saying that my publisher wouldn't have done that, but I didn't want to take that chance.
Yeah, it's so precious.
Yeah.
And it's so personal. So to not have it in a space of care or the type of intention that you were looking for, I think would end up being really harmful to you.
Yeah. And I think, the publisher that I did go with, I think they did a great job with the poems that I did bring to them, even through the editing process. Like, I got really good feedback. There wasn't a lot of edits, small things. And so that was really, I'm like, okay, we can do this. We're working together. We're getting this out. And I'm really proud of the collection that did come out, and the way that it's structured, the sequence of it. I think it does really still withhold the thing that I was going for. And I think to answer one of your previous questions, you said how people experiencing it, they are experiencing the way that I want it. They are saying like, I feel this as a Black queer person, that you are really like taking your autonomy back.
Yeah.
And that helps me to like know that I can also like have my autonomy. I can live the way that I want to live.
Yeah.
And I can like show up in the world the way that I want to show up in the world.
Exactly. And I think that, to know that that was your intention and it is being received that way, I can only imagine how validating that must feel for you.
Yeah, it's really amazing. People could keep asking like, well, how does it feel? How does it feel? But I'm like, I was waiting for those first reviews. I was waiting for, my friends and my family to say, that poem, MASH, like that poem really, I love that poem. I love the way that it's structured. I love the things that it talks about, or like, calling out certain poems by name. That was really, I'm like, okay, you were reading.
Right, like you were reading. Okay. It's not just like, oh yeah, they were really nice poems. Yeah. Like you were like, no, I like this one in particular because of this and this. Yes. This is how it resonated with me. I think that's so special.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about coming of age and identity, right, I think what I always bunch that together with is always this mental health, to feel like you are one type of person and that you can't present yourself in that way in the world due to whatever is preventing you from doing so, really takes a part of your mental health for sure, in so many different ways. So I'm wondering, as you were curating the poems for this book and writing them, how were you also stepping into your identity?
As I was writing them, I was really thinking about all these, I don't want to say lies, because for some people it works, but like, these accolades are like these things that we collect, getting married, having children, traditionally, it was kind of always in the back of my mind that like, these are the things that I need to achieve, like climbing the corporate ladder, like becoming like a CEO, or like becoming like a director or whatever, vice president. And I was like, sometimes I would feel like, okay, so what does it mean if I don't want those things?
Right.
Like, what does that mean? What does that say about me?
About me.
And so I did have to really work through that in therapy and kind of, come to this resolve that it doesn't say anything about me. I'm like, I don't have to achieve the things that other people achieve. I think that kind of goes into like when people look at other people's accolades and they want them for themselves. It's like, no, we all have our own space. We all have our own timeline. We all have, our own destinations along our journey, and we don't have to compare them. You can be successful and not have any kids or a spouse. Like there's many ways to be successful, and I had to remind myself of that.
Yeah. Everything that you said is so true. And, because as we're children, we're told that success looks this one way. You go to college, you get a good job, you get the job, you get married, you get a house, you get kids, you get a nice car, you vacation all the time, you move up in your job, you stay there 20, 30 years. like that literally sounds like hell to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That doesn't mean that they're any less successful or that they're any less ambitious because they don't want to move up or become like the term I hate the most is like a boss babe. It's not for everybody. Like it simply isn't,
Yeah.
So it's like, what about our society doesn't accept different ways of living and different definitions of success?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. Even being a Black woman who's queer, I, really went into this kind of with the chips stacked against me. And I was saying, I think one of the questions that came up on Friday is like, how did you think, or like, which ways do you think your family felt about it? I never like came out. I never like had a coming out post where I say,
not
hey,
necessary.
Exactly.
It's not, unless you want to.
Exactly.
Right? It's not necessary.
And so I was kind of nervous about like the older people in my family, like getting this book. People buy books and they put them on the shelf and they don't read them. I said, maybe this is one of those,
You're crossing your fingers. Like, they're just going to have it in the house.
Yeah, just put it on display. Yeah. Like, that's fine. But it's also like, hopefully some of those people who read it, maybe they never got a chance to be queer. Like, my family's from Mississippi and Arkansas, like deep South.
Right.
A lot of them didn't get to live in their true identities, I would assume.
Yeah.
And so hopefully if they do read it, maybe they'll feel a little bit of, you know, a little bit of like joy and being like, oh, I didn't get to live the life that I wanted, or I didn't get to be, you know, explore, I should say.
Yeah.
But at least my great niece or my granddaughter gets to kind of be herself in this lifetime.
Yeah. And that might be healing for them too, in a way that they didn't expect, right? Because it seems like you've done a lot of work to be more grounded in your identity and come to the realization, like, I don't need to make a post about coming out. I don't need to have a coming out party because I don't need to do that.
Right.
And for them to be able to see you living freely and talking about it, and also the reception of your work, you know, the hope is that it heals something within them too that maybe wasn't able to be seen.
Right. Yeah, that's always what I'm hoping for. That's always my intention. I really approach poetry as, I used to say this thing when I was teaching, that you should always approach the page with joy, even if you're writing about something that's difficult. Because I think sometimes we get into this, you know, this mode of writing about something difficult, and it takes a lot out of you.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes poets don't know how to recalibrate and kind of like get back to that safe space. So I'm like, even if you're writing about something difficult, if you just come to the page like with a positive attitude, come to the page with like, I'm going to figure out this poem, I'm going to write. And maybe it's not a poem, maybe it's just like,
maybe just writing.
Yeah, a journal entry for the day. But I think that we put a lot of pressure on poets to kind of gush everything. I saw it a lot when I was in like spaces with youth, like teenagers, you know, with slams. They would be like, it was almost encouraged for them to like get up there and kind of say the worst thing that happened to them.
Oh, wow.
And like some of the kids would call competing like the trauma Olympics.
Oh, wow.
And I think that sometimes we get into these modes where we're not being responsible adults because we're not really thinking about
ourselves.
Yeah, like these kids are getting on stage in front of how many people and saying something that really hurt them, something that, you know, an instance where they didn't feel safe or something happened. And what does it mean to kind of take those poems away and let those be poems that they just wrote for healing, or they just wrote
not for competition or for, you know, some future success, right? Like, I do see that a lot in like the world that we live in now, especially on TikTok, which I know we mentioned earlier, right? It's like sometimes, or what I like about TikTok is that you're able to find people that may have experienced something that you thought you were the only person that experienced it.
Yes.
So you find those types of people, which is really validating. And then there's also like a commodifying way that trauma is discussed on that app that I find to be really, really sad, because it almost dehumanizes the person telling their story, because people are just curious. It's like, for instance, what's an example? I'm thinking of many examples. Okay, there's one that I saw. This woman basically found out that her best friend had hated her for 5 years. The best friend felt really torn up about it one day, called her, was like, yeah, I really don't like you, like, at all. And here's all the things that I've been trying to do to kind of make life difficult for you, but pretending that I was happy for you and all these ones, like really terrible stuff. So some people in the comments were like, yeah, okay, like this is really awful. Like, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Like, are you okay? And then some people in the comments were like, well, how do we know if this is even the truth? Like, she could definitely be making this up. What? It's like, what? So then it's like the woman is like now posting screenshots of like what would arguably be one of the most difficult things she's ever experienced in her life, to try to prove to people that she's not lying about a traumatic experience that she's still processing. And I do think that we live in a society that rewards that. Like, whoever has the saddest, you know, situation, it's like they get to have these really big moments socially, but at the end of the day, they're still people.
Yeah.
Once the camera turns off, they're still living with that trauma. Just like the 50-part story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so happy for all of the success that she's got, but it's like she got the success off of a very traumatic experience, right? Where's the balance?
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not one of those people who's going to get on the internet and expose themselves for clicks. It's just not necessary. And I do also feel for those people who do. There is a bravery in that, of course.
Absolutely.
But I do think about what is the cost. What is the cost?
To them, right?
Yeah.
Right. You're in sharing their stories. Most of the times I see people, they're like, oh, I'm so glad that you spoke up. Like, this is something that happened to me. You know, your bravery has really helped me throughout my process. I think that's the positive side. Mm-hmm. But at the back end, I always worry about, when is it enough? Like, when do you take the time to really process what you're talking about and to really heal?
Right. I also think, like, what is the goal? Is your goal to, because, right, like, if we're talking about something traumatic, sometimes our goal is, like you're saying, to kind of shed light on something that's happening. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that, like, people don't feel alone and they feel like, you know, maybe this is a safe space or maybe this is a safe interaction with someone that I can now kind of explore my pain and get help if I need it, or, you know, just be able to, like, kind of think it through. But if the goal is just clicks and the goal is just, like, this internet fame, I just think that we put so much stock in, like, clout or, like, internet fame that sometimes people don't see the full picture of it. Where it can lead. Just even the safety. Like, if you're talking about a situation that you're having with someone and they see it and they kind of try to retaliate against you or whatever the case is. It's like, or people, like, get on and, like, confess their crimes, and it's just like, y'all, please.
Like, when did we get here? But it's like, I think, you know, what you mentioned earlier about seeing it in poetry as well, too, with these young poets. It's like, as a society, I think when people think about poets and poetry, it's always like sadness and, like, very heavy topics and heavy content, right? That, you know, you're mentioning that, you know, to approach the page with joy and feel satisfied with what you're writing. But I don't think people, maybe this is me, people don't think of, like, poetry and think, like, joy and happiness all the time. They think about, like, very sad and traumatic experiences that are being told. And then it's like, that's the expectation. So I think from teaching, I'm assuming you see the kids see, like, oh, I need to find something that's, like, really, like, the thing so that I'll do really good at this, or I'll be a really good poet if I can make this as, like, devastating as possible.
Right. And the thing is like, it's poetry. At the end of the day, you can lie. It doesn't have to be your own experience. Or you can take, you know, a part of your experience and then add to it where you see fit. So I think my thing is, like, even if you approach the, like, what I mean is, like, for instance, in grad school, there used to be some poets who would drink before they wrote poetry.
Oh, wow.
And they would drink because they wanted to pull those, like, very deep, heavy emotions out.
Just, like,
it's not healthy.
It's not.
It's very, and even I would say, like, within my culture at grad school, there was, like, so much drinking.
Oh, yes. That is, like, a known thing. Yeah. And the drink, it's almost encouraged. Yeah. Like, I don't know anyone that was, like, sober in grad school, because it's like, you're stressed and, you know, you need to be writing all the time and you need to dig deeper and you need to dig deeper. And then there's free wine everywhere. So
exactly. Free wine at all the events.
All the events.
And so I just was kind of looking at it at that time. And then, like, also working, I went to school in California. I worked with Youth Speaks. So, like, then seeing, like, going from seeing people drinking all the time to pull these deep, dark emotions kind of out of their work, and then working with kids who are like, yo, we want to do poetry, we want to slam, but we don't want to talk about the most traumatic thing. We want to have, like, on-site therapists at our slams, because we want to make sure when we get off that stage that there is some kind of, like,
aftercare.
Yes. And so it was kind of like this,
like, a very polarizing experience.
I'm like, okay, wait, like, I don't want to be in that kind of topsy-turvy, like, writing process. Like, that's not how I want to write poetry. Like, yeah, I am gonna pull some things out, but also I think there's value in seeing, like, maybe you're not ready to write this poem.
If I don't have it, I don't have it right now.
Maybe you're not ready to write this poem. Maybe you need
time.
And that's why I said about, like, my full length, I'm like, it's not ready, because it's like, I still need to live more. I still need to, like, kind of hash things out more. I still need to, like, get to a place where I can write about the things that I want to write about. I tried to write a poem about my dad for years, and it just was bad. It was bad. It wasn't ready. And then I ended up writing a creative nonfiction piece for it, and that worked well because I needed sentences. I needed, like, a different vehicle.
A different structure, right?
Yes. And so sometimes it's, like, about that. Like, how can we find different modes? Like, maybe it's not poetry. Maybe this is a collage. Maybe this is a painting. Maybe this is, fiction or something like that. So it's like, please, when you're coming to write poetry, like, don't think that you have to completely bare your soul. Give yourself time, space, energy to live,
and leave something for yourself too, right? Like, once you keep giving in that extent, right, where you're now forcing it, right? When you go home, nobody else is there. You've got all the awards. Like, what's left for you?
That's the thing. Yeah, I don't want to leave my heart on the stage. Like, I want to perform well and I want to be received well, but I don't want this genre to take everything. To, like you're saying, like, at the end of the night, you're like, ugh.
Right.
I want to still, like, at the end of the night, be, like, talking to people, like, joining in with my community, seeing how they felt about it, seeing, like, where I can venture next, like, seeing, like, what people really, the work that people really loves. Like, how can I continue to write in that lane? I'm not trying to, like, be like, you know what, Deshara, you should write about the most traumatic thing that happened to you. Like, let's just, like, keep it above board. That's how I think about it. I mean, the thing I really love about writing poetry is, like, language, diction, like, being, like, very playful, having these, like, double entendres and jamming. Like, that's what I love about poetry. And also the power of poetry. Like I was saying, like, the fact that we still read June Jordan and Lucille Clifton, and their work can really easily
transcend time.
That's what I'm looking for. People to find power in my work for years and centuries to come.
That's what it should be about, right? But that work that you're describing takes time. And like you said, like, it takes looking at yourself and being able to be like, I know there's more here. I'm not ready to tap into the more, so I'll wait. And like I said to you before we started filming, we don't live in a world that values waiting and taking time and being patient. We just want to go and keep putting out things.
Exactly.
And I just don't think art works that way.
Yeah, I mean, it works that way for some people, and they can pump out books, and I'm always, like, so impressed. I'm like, y'all, y'all got it.
Me too. I'm like, you got another book coming out next year? You just put this one out, okay?
Yeah, and I really admire that. I just know that's not my process. And the thing that's been really difficult, I would say, is figuring out that that's not my process.
And then accepting it.
Accepting that that's not my process and being like, because I'm very, like, hard on myself. I'm like, people are like, oh, you're doing all this stuff. And I'm like, it doesn't feel like it. I'm like, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like I'm doing nothing.
I'm never doing enough. Right. I could be doing more, but I'm just here.
So I think that's, like, a thing that I really want to work out in therapy. It's like, how can I be content with what I'm doing? How can I be content when nothing's being made? When I'm just in the thought process, like, when I'm just, like, dreaming up what is
you're
next.
Just existing.
Like, how can I just be like, that's fine.
This is good for right now.
That's fine right now.
I always tell people, as a therapist who also has a therapist, it's a daily, sometimes hourly practice to be content with where you are and what you're doing. I think sometimes we just kind of see being content as like an overall feeling, like an umbrella feeling. Like once I get to this and I have all of these things taken care of, then I'll be content. But that's not true. Things are always moving. We're always changing. Our needs are always changing. How we view the world is always changing. So us feeling content has to kind of change too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, today being content could mean, you coming here doing this podcast and that feels like being content to you. And then tomorrow it could mean something completely different.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And I think also, I know for me, it's like, how do I feel content when then on the other side of the world, there's like genocide happening and all these like really heavy things that are happening. How do you feel content within that? How do you feel like, you're like, I'm like clacking away at work and I'm like, okay, but what I really care about. Yeah. Or just, and especially because I work in social media, people are like, just get off social media. I'm like, this is literally my job. I have to check it. I have to check it I'm checking my socials, like my work socials. Even I did it on the way here. So it's like, it doesn't really stop.
No.
And so it's easy, I think, to say, like, this is the thing you should be doing, but it's harder to kind of, like, embody it and, like, be like, okay, well, I can take, or not feel, like, guilty about it and being like, oh, well, I'm just content with my day. I'm on a podcast, but
so much is happening. Yeah.
It's hard. It
and
is. Finding the balance within that is definitely something that I also work on with my therapist.
I'm asking you, like, as someone that is a writer and living in the world that we live in, how do you meet yourself with joy on the page, carrying the devastation that we all carry on a day-to-day basis, personally, globally? How do you meet yourself with joy? How do you take care of yourself after closing the page too?
Yeah. I mean, so that poem that I was talking about, Ode to the People Who Touch the Bottom, which is like the most recent poem that I had that came out, I really wanted to just show my support and show that I'm thinking about a perceived future, you know? And I'm also worried that, this can go completely wrong. Like, we may not be able to save them.
Yeah.
Because we live in a country who's going to do what it does, you know?
Yeah.
And also the complicity within, like, having a cell phone and, like, all of these things and wanting to, like, get more.
Yeah.
We were always like striving for more. So how do we be more responsible Americans? How do we be more responsible people of the world who say that we care and say that we like want, an imperialist free world? How do we like actually get behind what we're saying? So that's what I'm always thinking about, like how I can just be a better community member, how I can like be like walk the walk and talk the talk, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't think that I'm there, but I think that I'm always striving, and I think that matters.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think because we live in such a fast-paced world, it's starting to feel sometimes that just trying to be a good community member and being conscious of the ways that you are supporting and trying to show up for your community and also the world, it feels like it's not enough. And because of that, I think it deters a lot of people from wanting to take any steps. And that, to me, is where we've missed the point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Lost the plot, for
lost
sure.
it for sure. I'll say when I read the poem that you're talking about for Torch, I was like, I feel like you embodied a lot of the feelings that I feel now in comparison to how I felt in October. I think a lot of us felt differently then than now for many reasons, right? And I think for how I'm feeling now, I feel like you were able to embody that completely in that poem. And I'm wondering if you received any negative feedback and were there any anxieties about putting it out, just because we do live in a world that does not everybody thinks the way that we do, or is on this the right side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't got any negative feedback.
Great.
But, you know, if you have any, listen, I'm not afraid. Like, everyone is entitled to feel how they feel. Sure. I didn't really go into it thinking about backlash, honestly.
Good.
Because it's just genuinely how I feel. I want everybody to be free. So I never thought like, oh, maybe someone is going to be offended by this.
Yeah.
How can you be offended by freedom? Like, I don't.
Please say that again.
Like, I can't even.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense at all. And, you know, I think in hearing you say that, it's reassuring because I've seen a lot of artists be scared because of I don't know if you saw, but even Miss Rachel, probably one of the nicest people that's ever come out of the internet, like, received so much hate and just not even hate, but also like messages, like death threats over supporting children, which is the thing that we know her to do.
Exactly.
That's her whole thing. What else was she going to do?
Yeah. You know? I can't even think that, you know, I can't even let that. I mean, the first poem in my chat book is Bible, where I'm basically talking about white Jesus. You know, if I was going to be worried about backlash, then there's no reason for me to be a poet.
Yeah.
You know, you have to like come to the page with truth. You have to say the things that the quiet parts out loud is what I like to say. And it's really important for me to be authentic to like who I am, what I represent, what I want people to know. I want you to know that I care about the liberty and justice of all people. I want you to know that I am against genocide in all forms. I want you to know that I'm against police brutality, cop cities, all of that stuff. Yeah. I will never be like...
Not against that.
Yeah, like I will never be for any of that brutality. And that is my job to make sure that comes through in my poetry.
And as a reader, I think it's important to know where an author stands on these things, because it's like, it's not something that you can separate from the art, even though people try to argue that. But for me, it's very comforting to know that, okay, we stand for the same things. Yeah. I have no complaints, you know, supporting you. Like, it's made me even more connected to your work, right? Knowing that we both support and have the same values, right, when it comes to the world that we live in.
Yeah.
What would you say to maybe a young poet or someone that's trying to figure out their voice right now, but is maybe struggling based off of expectations that we discussed all throughout this episode? What would you say to them if they were afraid to maybe identify as a poet or to put their work out there?
I would say, when I was in a workshop, Vivi Francis says you don't write poems to put them under your bed. And so I think about, it doesn't necessarily have to be you go a traditional publishing route. Maybe the way that you're supposed to be a poet is you share it on Instagram or you share it on TikTok. Afraid, I mean, do it when you're ready. There's no, I don't think there's a timeline. Just write what you think or is missing in the world, or like where you want to see poets go. Like, what do you think what do you think about the space that poets are in, and how do you think you can add something to it? Like, how can you add value? Because people need to hear your voice. Even when you think that they don't, they do. There's a pocket, there's a lane for everyone. We don't all experience the world the same way. So in being a poet, putting your work out there, you're opening yourself up for community. You're opening yourself up to like be in a community with different poets, to be in a lineage of poets. And so I think that's important. And if you care about, you know, having a voice, if you care about being the person that you needed when you were growing, like when I was growing, I needed to see those examples.
Yes.
I needed to know that I could do this, because I didn't think that people were poets in the traditional sense. I thought that poets were like rich white men who could who had all the time in the world.
Right, that they could do that.
Exactly. And so by putting your voice out there, you're showing someone else that it's possible.
Yeah, yeah. You're really describing for me, the foundation of representation. I always speak for myself as well, too. Becoming a therapist was not something that I ever imagined for myself, because I didn't know any Black therapists. I didn't know any Nigerian American therapists. They just didn't exist to me. They weren't in my orbit. And when we don't see ourselves in positions, it becomes a space of impossibility. So, like you said, we do need their voice. We do need more voices to continue to be an example to those that are looking at us, even when we don't know that they're looking at us.
Exactly.
And a question I always ask everyone is, what would the younger version of you think of your life today?
I think she would probably be so impressed. She would also be like, you don't like sports? Even though I do like sports. But, I was such a jock when I was younger. I was so, like, into, like, playing sports and, like, being smart and, like, winning, you know? Yeah. And then now I'm, like, a lot more chill, a lot more...
Go with the flow.
Yeah. So she was like, "Oh, girl, you're calm. You're grown up." So I think she would be proud that I'm getting back to the things that I loved as a kid. I'm actually like exploring it and seeing where it can go. I didn't let that little piece of my inner child die.
Yeah. No, that's so beautiful. I think being able to reconnect with your inner child however you can, which is why I asked that question, is so important. I think it's so healing in a way that's almost indescribable, that I really hope everyone can experience and witness.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your words today. I think I'm leaving feeling inspired in many ways, and I'm really excited to see how you continue to inspire those around you, and I hope that anyone listening can take something away from this conversation. I hope so, at least. Like, I know I'm taking stuff away. So thank you so much.
Thank you again for having me. This was great to kind of dig deeper into some of those subject matters.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.